I'll take one or two questions if you got. Yeah.
So why is the opposition so virulent?
Okay, so that's a good question. So part of it is, look, the opposition, for the most part, they're looking at the court and going, you know what? These guys in the court, right? They kind of look like us, right? I mean, these judges, they're, you know, it's what they call here the Shevet Halavan, okay, the white people, right? They look like us, right? And they look at the coalition, and the coalition doesn't really look much like them, right? The coalition is a bunch of people who are, let's face it, they're Haredi, they're Dati, they're settlers, they're Sfardim. They just don't look like them. And they go, I don't trust these guys. I don't know what they're capable of. I don't know what kind of crazy things they're going to do to me, right? So that's what's driving them crazy, right? They're going, I don't trust these guys, but I do trust the court. Now, I don't have enough time for this, but I can tell you that I personally, as a person who believes in individual liberty, I'm not one of these guys who wants to, you know, force people to, you know, keep Shabbos or anything like that. I'm completely a libertarian on all matters. I want people to be free to do what they want, all right? But when I look at the court and how the court treats people, and when I look at the Knesset, I am more worried by the court curtailing my individual freedom than I'm worried about the Knesset and the government curtailing my freedom. Okay.
Why did it take 40 years?
Yeah, well, thank you. Because we needed 64 fingers in the coalition that would vote for it. That's the short answer. Yeah.
So what is the system that they propose for putting in new judges other than...
So it just play. No, it's playing with the panel. There's a panel of 9 right now, and on the panel of 9, there were three judges, 2 members of the Bar Association, 2 members of Knesset, and 2 ministers. Okay, and the idea is to simply, first of all, throw out the Bar Association, which, aside from the fact that they're beholden to the judges all the time because they appear before the judges, the additional problem is that the head of the Bar Association, year after year, seems to get involved in some kind of Me Too scandal, okay? So these guys, everybody wants to get rid of the Bar Association, that's number one, and get more of the politicians on the committee, right? More ministers, more members of Knesset on the committee. The question is only, how do you diminish the influence of the judges on the committee? And how do you know, what is the proportion of coalition versus opposition members that are going to be sitting on this committee? But this is totally technical stuff, okay?
But how do you minimize the impact of politicians putting in the justices?
Okay.
Right now, the parties in power may be the powers we all approve of, but tomorrow they may not.
Right. So let me remind you that in the United States, for example, right, the president nominates and the Senate ratifies, right? They're all politicians. The president and the senators are all politicians.
You need advice and consent.
Yeah, but it's still, they're all elected politicians, right? So you might quibble about whether the committee should have more opposition members than it currently has. You know, what should be the proportion of coalition to opposition? These are legitimate discussions, and they're all being had right now, okay? And I'm involved in these discussions, and they're legitimate, right? But the idea that you want to have judges on the committee because they're kind of babysitters, because we don't trust the politicians, right? That's not a good idea. Now, the point that you hinted at is a very important one, which is that when we make these decisions about how to structure it and how to build the committee, we should do it from behind the veil of ignorance. In other words, we shouldn't say, well, wait a minute, right now, people we like are in the coalition and people we don't like are in the opposition, so let's give the coalition a lot of influence and let's give the opposition very little influence. That's a bad way to design the procedures by which we make important decisions, right, for the next 500 years, right?
But that seems to be the fueling.
It is absolutely correct that nobody who's actually arguing the case here is behind the veil of ignorance, right? Everybody's going, wait a minute, I got 64 votes, I got this many ministers, I got this. Let me see how I can construct this, you know, this committee so that I get the optimal outcome tomorrow morning, right? And I agree with you that that's a dumb idea because the right wing might find itself 2 years from now or 4 years from now or 10 years from now in the opposition, and you don't want to be screwing over the opposition too much, right? So I'm completely agreeing with you that we want to get this right. We don't want to give too much power to the coalition at the expense of the opposition. But the idea that we ought to be getting the judges out of this panel, or at least minimizing their influence, I think that's a no-brainer.
Why should it
What?
Why don't you go down the British way, where there are no politicians on the equivalent panel?
Right.
Independent voices.
Right. So.
Wouldn't that diffuse a lot of this anger?
Yeah. So the problem is this. So in the British system now, they've changed it a few times, but right now for Supreme Court justices, so there are 5 people. There are 5 people on the panel. You know, somebody from Wales and somebody from Scotland and some lawyers from here and from there and some whatever. Okay. The point is that there is this notion in, Great Britain that there are judges who are actually above politics, and therefore, yeah, these are professionals, and they're just going to do the professional thing. Israel is so not there, okay? It's like, okay, who are these judges or legal eagles that are going to be on the committee that don't have some axe to grind,
Nobody has an axe to grind, but at least they're not appointed by the politicians, as
right.
America.
Right, as in almost every other country, by the way. But let me point out to you.
How about some women harassed women?
Okay, all right, so, yeah.
One thing that could be like America is there could be some transparency, the forbidding of
Yes.
the public to watch these.
Correct, 100%. The proceedings that happen in Israel in the committee are completely secret. Not only are they secret, there are no protocols. It's not just that they're not filmed, there are no protocols, and I agree with you completely. But the answer to your question is, in most of the world, Great Britain is an exception where it's a professional panel. There's advantages to it, but bear in mind that in Great Britain, judges cannot strike down laws. Okay, so because judges have less authority, politicians care less about who they are because they're not making policy in the end. Okay? Right.
Ever since I can remember, the fight that's going on here has been fought in Britain. And sometimes the politicians win a bit, sometimes the judges. It's always a tension.
Right.
But nobody ever thinks in Britain that they certainly think the judges are ideological. They have a set of views.
Right.
Because no one doesn't. The legal profession generally marches to the same kind of tune of human rights, blah, blah. But nobody thinks they are political partisans as they are in America.
Right. I get that. It does. I don't think that would work in Israel. Because nobody thinks that there's a single judge in Israel who isn't somehow partisan. I mean, if that were not the case, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. But unfortunately, it just does not make sense in the Israeli situation.
Moshe, I'll ask you a last question because you told me.
I got to run.
You're probably over your time already, but it's very clear that the rollout of the concept of judicial reform was done in such a way that allowed the opposition to get out ahead of the narrative.
Yeah.
Now we're in a mess.
Yeah.
So tell me, from your view, how do we get out of this mess? What's going to happen next in the coming months?
Okay, so the bad ways that this could go is we could ram this through with the 64 votes we have, and then the court might strike it down because they do that kind of thing. Or it would just, some new government would come in because this isn't totally popular, and then they would just, just change it all back, right? All kinds of bad stuff could happen, right? And the left would continue with their insane, drilling holes in the bottom of the boat and then screaming at the right for doing this reform that caused the boat to sink, right? So all of these bad things could happen. Another possibility is that we cave, right? And that's also a catastrophe. The obvious thing to do is to try to get 5 to 10 members of the opposition to vote for this reform in exchange for small changes in the way the reform is done. So you say, you know what, we'll drop the override, we'll tone down a couple of things, and then you get 5 to 10 members of the opposition to vote for it. It becomes much more popular, totally defangs all the demonstration, the oppositions, and that's the end of it.
Except how are you going to find those 5 opposition members who will not do something that helps Bibi's coalition?
Yeah, so that's what I basically spend my days and my nights doing. That's what I'm doing.
Well, good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.